Hey, seventh grade, it's me, Mr. Alec, coming to you live from the hallway, trying to get a move note up for you today so we can do our flip lesson. Our flip lesson looks much like a vocab pullable. You should have a picture to represent each of the different movements on the front. Then you'll have your notes throughout here. Just copy down the notes. It is going to be a little bit long. There's going to be a lot of writing. Write small, try your best. If you have any questions for me, hit me up on Schoology. But let's get going before the move note breaks again. Abolitionist movement. The abolitionist movement's goal was to end slavery in the United States at the high end. A lot of abolitionists also, at the very least, guys like Abraham Lincoln, at least wanted to stop the spread of slavery because the spread of slavery was becoming a problem. As the United States is growing, we're getting more and more states. Whether or not those states are slave or free isn't just a problem with the state, it's a problem with the country because that might upset the balance of power. Like if we vote on a slave bill and there's more slave states than free states, that could be very problematic for the free states and vice versa. So that they're worried about adding to this what is called the slave power of the national government. And you can see from the map, slavery is kind of gone in the north by 1860 and spreading throughout the south very heavily, particularly in the deep south. The abolitionist movement is led by a diverse cast of characters, people like William Lloyd Garrison, Frederick Douglass, Angelina and Sarah Grimke, and Sojourner Truth. Each of these people is kind of contributing in their own way. What William Lloyd Garrison and Frederick Douglass are kind of teaming up. William Lloyd Garrison runs the Liberator, a very famous anti-slavery newspaper. Sarah Grimke is publishing articles and books against slavery. Frederick Douglass is giving speeches against slavery, and so is Sojourner Truth. As a result of these actions, most of the northern states have abolished slavery by 1850. Newspapers and books are being printed all across the country, and the movement has sparked not only people reading and writing about anti-slavery, but actually making movements against it with the Underground Railroad, people like Harriet Tubman bringing freed escaped slaves up to the north. The temperance movement is going to be all about the consumption of alcoholic beverages. The problem that they see is drinking alcohol is causing a variety of social problems, with gambling, crime, domestic abuse at home, poverty, all sorts of different issues. Their goal is to at the very least limit, but again, most temperance movement folks are going to be wanting to make alcohol illegal across the United States, not just in a single state, but in the entire country. There isn't very many like leaders like a Frederick Douglass or a Harriet Tubman or something like that with the temperance movement. It's largely held in what are called temperance unions or temperance groups. Women are very involved in the movement. One of the biggest groups is going to be the Women's Christian Temperance Union, but by about 1850, there's 500 of these groups across the country. So this is a pretty big movement and got a lot of action during this time period. Lost a little bit of their power during the Civil War and after the Civil War, but is going to regain their power after that. Actions and results, states are going to create what they call blue laws, which are going to limit or stop the drinking of alcohol across the country. And women are also going to use their participation in the temperance movement to go on and fight for other issues like suffrage and things like that. The prison reform movement is going to have a lot of different issues and problems along with it. Inmates are going to be chained in cages. Children are in jail with adults. The mentally ill are sent to prison. And there's no mental hospital. So basically you have super duper poor conditions. Inmates are not being treated very well. They're not properly housed. And their goal is to create healthier prisons, get the children into their own separate facilities so that children aren't influenced by adults and basically become criminalized. And to get better treatment for inmates, you can kind of see two of the big time, the tranquility chair, where people were hooked up for hours, if not the whole day, and kind of the exercise program where blinded inmates are kind of led around ropes in the square. Prison reform is led by Dorothea Dix. She's out of Massachusetts, but her reforms spread throughout all different areas. The results is there's going to be mental hospitals established, and we're going to get people with mental illness separated from people who are like robbing banks and stuff like that. One of the big problems with the prisons where they're overcrowded, we're going to have new laws for debtors, so people who owed money are not sent to prison. That's going to free up a lot of the jail space. Children are going to be separated from adults, and cruel and unusual punishments are going to be outlawed. Not to say that a prison in the 1830s is a great place to live, but it's not as bad after the movement of prison reform by leaders like Cynthia Dix. The women's rights movement is going to be focused on a few problems in the 1800s. Number one, women could not vote. They could not control money or property. And domestic violence or physical abuse against a woman by a man was not outlawed. If you've ever heard the idea of a rule of thumb, all right, the rule of thumb stated that a husband or a father could discipline a daughter or their wife with a stick or a rod as long as that stick or rod was no wider than their thumb. So physical abuse was allowed during this time period. The goals of the women's rights movement was to gain new rights, and many of them believe that they've got suffrage or the right to vote. That's going to solve most of the issues for women because it's going to give them a voice to elect people that will get rid of those laws that are against women. The women's rights movement was led particularly by women, but there were men involved. Particularly Frederick Douglass was involved, William Lloyd Garrison was involved, and many of the husbands of the wives here were involved as well. Lucretia Mott, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucy Stone, Susan B. Anthony were all women that were from this particular area, Rochester and the Finger Lakes region, that were very much involved in the women's rights movement. One of the biggest movements that happened during this time period is going to be the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848. They're going to produce what is called the Declaration of Sentiments, which is going to be modeled after the Declaration of Independence. It's going to list the grievances of women, just like we did with the Declaration of Independence. We're going to get some changes to laws, allowing divorces, allowing women to have property rights, allowing women to control their own wages, but women are not going to get to vote for many of the early suffragist movement until after they have passed away, because women are not going to be allowed to vote in the entire country until the 1920. Education reform. We're going to kind of try to go through this as quickly as possible, so use the pause button. There's few public schools. Those schools that we have are overcrowded. Teachers are untrained. Most kids who are in school aren't there the entire time, so they're losing a lot of time to going to the farm, working, etc. The goal is to create a common school that is not just focused on religion, so you get the same education no matter where you are, New York, Texas, etc., and free schools for all children. The education reform movement is led by a man named Horace Mann. A lot of the things that you have in schools now were created by him, period structures, separating the curriculum, separating teachers into different curriculums were all things that were developed by Horace Mann. What you're going to see is to develop public elementary schools, so kids are going to be mandatory to go to school at least until 5th or 6th grade. School taxes are going to be used to pay for those schools. Public colleges are going to be created, and you're going to see more kids entering the school. By 1850, school rolls are up to 50% of all children, which by 1830, we were more closer to 20%. All right, that's our flip lesson for tonight. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up on Schoology.